SANTERÍA/LUCUMÍL. La Regla de Ocha, Cuba and the Caribbean. Beliefs, rituals, and traditions. The Orishas of Yoruba Nigeria, preserved in Cuba under the cover of Catholic saints. Yemanjá became Our Lady of Regla. Shango became Santa Barbara. Obatala became Our Lady of Mercy. Ochún became Our Lady of Charity. The most extraordinary act of sacred concealment in the Western Hemisphere. And one of the most living, most growing sacred traditions in the Americas today. Personal Reading Series May 2026 Allegricity2.q. Productions. Contents. Introduction, the name, the myth, and the reality. Part 1, Historical Roots, Yoruba in Cuba. Part 2, the Syncretism Strategy, Saints as Sacred Cover. Part 3, LUCUMÍL Cosmology, LUCUMÍL, the Orishas, and the Two Words. Part 4, /Ocha in LUCUMÍL Practice. Part 5, the Ori and Personal Destiny in LUCUMÍL. Part 6, the Major Orishas of LUCUMÍL with their saint correspondences. Part 7, Elegua, Guardian of the Crossroads. Part 8, Yemanjá, Queen of the Sea. Part 9, Ochún, the River, Love, and Gold. Part 10, Shango, Thunder, Justice, and the Dance of Power. Part 11, Ochún, Iron, the Forest, and the Open Path. Part 12, Obatala, the Creator and the White Cloth. Part 13, Ocha, Wind, Change, and the Marketplace of Souls. Part 14, Orala, the Witness, Ifor in LUCUMÍL. Part 15, the Isle, Community and Sacred Infrastructure. Part 16, Initiation, Kariocha, Making the Orisha. Part 17, the Warriors, First Steps into the Tradition. Part 18, Receiving the Warriors, How it Works. Part 19, Divination in LUCUMÍL, Diligon and Ifor. Part 20, the Tambour, Drumming Ceremony. Part 21, Igbo, Offering and Sacred Reciprocity. Part 22, How to Make Offerings, Accessible Practices. Part 23, the Kola, Sacred Beats. Part 24, LUCUMÍL and Palo Mayombe, the Bantu Element. Part 25, LUCUMÍL Today, Cuba, the Diaspora, and the World. Part 26, Allegricity Convergences. Introduction. Santería is a word that practitioners mostly do not use to describe their own tradition. It was coined by Spanish colonial authorities as a derogatory term meaning saint worship, intended to dismiss the Afro-Cuban tradition as a naive conflation of African practice with Catholic devotion. The preferred terms within the tradition are LUCUMÍL, La Regla de Ocha, or simply La Regla. By any name, this is a tradition of extraordinary depth, extraordinary resilience, and extraordinary beauty, the Yoruba Orisha religion preserved in Cuba through 3 centuries of enslavement and suppression, emerging in the 20th and 21st centuries as one of the most rapidly growing sacred traditions in the Western Hemisphere. From its Cuban base, LUCUMÍL has spread to Puerto Rico, the United States, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, and increasingly to Europe, carried by practitioners who recognize in it a living, efficacious, complete sacred system that addresses the full spectrum of human need. For Allegricity, LUCUMÍL is both familiar territory and a specific teaching in its own right, what it means to preserve a sacred tradition under the most extreme conditions of erasure, and how the specific act of identifying Orishas with Catholic saints, far from weakening the tradition, gave it a protective cover that allowed it to survive and ultimately to thrive. Historical Roots Yoruba in Cuba. Cuba received enslaved Africans from many different cultural groups, Congolese, Fonyo, Monde, and others, but the Yoruba were among the most numerous and became the most culturally dominant in terms of their religious heritage. The Yoruba presence in Cuba intensified in the early 19th century as the collapse of the Oyo Empire produced large numbers of enslaved people from Yoruba communities, precisely the period when the Haitian Revolution had frightened the colonial powers and they were importing enslaved Africans as rapidly as possible to maximize sugar production before conditions changed. The Cabildos, the survivor infrastructure. The primary institution that made LUCUMÍL preservation possible was the Cabildo, a mutual aid society organized by ethnic group, permitted by the Spanish colonial authorities as a form of social control. The Cabildos became the primary vehicle for preserving African cultural and religious traditions. They provided the community structure, the economic support, the leadership hierarchy, and the sacred space within which the Orisha tradition could be maintained. The Cabildo de Lucumí was specifically the Yoruba Mutual Aid Society. Its members were Yoruba-speaking Africans and their Cuban-born descendants, organized to provide funerary care, financial assistance to members, and the cultural maintenance of Yoruba tradition. Within the Cabildo, the sacred songs in Yoruba were preserved, the sacred drum rhythms were maintained, the Orisha knowledge was transmitted, and the initiation system was sustained, all under the protective cover of Catholic devotional practice that the Cabildos formally expressed. The syncretism strategy saints as sacred cover. The identification of Orishas with Catholic saints is one of the most consequential and most carefully engineered acts of sacred strategy in the history of religion. It was not confusion, not naive conflation, and not the degradation of the African tradition by colonial Christianity. It was a deliberate, intelligent, spiritually sophisticated survival strategy, the decision to give the Orishas new public faces that Spanish Catholic authorities would recognize and permit, while maintaining the authentic African practice behind that public face. Orisha, saint correspondences in Lucumí. Ilegu equals infant of Atocha or Saint Anthony, both associated with the crossroads and the opening of paths. OGN equals Saint Peter or Saint John the Baptist. Iron keys and the wilderness connect to Ogan's domains. Okosi equals Saint Norbert or Saint Hubert, patron saint of hunters, connect to this Orisha of the hunt. Obeta equals Our Lady of Mercy. White robes of mercy parallel Obatala. White cloth. Shango equals Santa Barbara, both associated with thunder and lightning. Barbara's tower and crown. Yeme equals Our Lady of Regla, the Black Madonna of Regla, patroness of Havana Bay. OCHN equals Our Lady of Charity, Cuba's patroness, the story of the three sailors rescued from the sea maps onto Ochún's waters. OY with acute equals Santa Barbara or Our Lady of Candelaria. Orala equals Saint Francis of Assisi, the friar's green and yellow robe parallels Orala's colors. The deeper meaning. The Lucumí saying about the saint-Orisha relationship is clear. The Orishas wear the saints' clothes to go out into the world, but inside the isle, they are themselves. The syncretism was always understood as protective strategy, not as theological confusion. Contemporary Lucumí practitioners vary in how they relate to the Catholic dimension. Some maintain the full syncretic practice as a living tradition with its own integrity, others have moved toward a more strictly Yoruba-identified practice, and others hold the two dimensions as genuinely complementary aspects of their sacred life. Lucumí cosmology. Olojime, the Orishas, and the two words. Lucumí cosmology is essentially identical to Yoruba cosmology, the same supreme being, the same two-world structure, and the same Orishas as intermediary divine forces. The specific Cuban experience has deepened certain dimensions of the tradition and added specific Lucumí elements, but the theological foundation is continuous with Yoruba tradition. Olojumea, Olifai, Olorum. Lucumí uses three names for aspects of the Supreme Being that are sometimes distinguished from each other. Olojuma is the Supreme Creator, the ultimate divine reality. Olifai is the aspect of the Supreme that actively governs the universe and delegates authority to the Orishas. Olorum is the aspect that is the source of all divine energy. This Trinitarian structure within the Supreme Being allowed Lucumí to present a surface compatibility with Christian Trinitarian theology, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, while maintaining a distinctly African theological structure beneath the surface. Connection to Haligrisity. The Lucumí cosmological framework, Olojuma as the supreme source, the Orishas as specific accessible expressions of divine power, the two-world structure with ongoing communication between them, is identical in its structure to what Haligrisity recognizes across traditions, a supreme source that operates through specific channels, and a human community whose proper sacred practice maintains the channels between the human and divine worlds. The specific gift of the Lucumí tradition to Haligrisity is the living demonstration that this understanding has sustained real communities through real suffering, that it is not a philosophical framework but a living technology of sacred resilience. Ash Oche in Lucumí practice. In Lucumí, the Yoruba ash becomes Oche, the same divine creative force, the same function as both sacred power and affirmation, the same theological role as the force flowing from Olojuma through the Orishas into all of creation. Oche is the Lucumí/Cuban name for what Haligrisity calls ash. Oche in daily Lucumí practice. Greeting between practitioners, Oche. Affirming the sacred force between two people who share the tradition closing of prayer, KACIC, Oche. The AX of an object, An object that has been properly prepared and charged with sacred force through ceremony is said to have Oche. It is not merely a material object but a vehicle of concentrated divine energy, the AX of the IL, the accumulated sacred power of a long-established house built up through generations of proper ceremony, initiation, and service to the Orishas is its Oche, its most precious inheritance and its most important offering to new initiates building ACH, regular prayer. Proper initiation, ethical conduct aligned with one's Orisha's character, proper performance of ceremonies, and the maintenance of the sacred objects, all build Oche in the practitioner over time. The Ori and personal destiny in LUCUMÍL. The LUCUMÍL understanding of Ori is identical to the Yoruba, the personal divine nature within each human being, chosen before birth, governing the specific destiny and path of this specific life. Before any work with the Orishas, the practitioner's own Ori must be attended to, fed, respected, and aligned. This is the foundation of LUCUMÍL practice and one of its most theologically important distinctions from traditions that focus exclusively on the cosmic forces without attending to the specific divine nature of the individual practitioner. The Rogación de Cabeza. The Rogación de Cabeza is the accessible LUCUMÍL practice for attending to the Ori, a ritual that can be performed by any practitioner, initiated or not, as a regular practice of self-care and sacred alignment. It involves the application of specific cooling, clarifying substances to the head, traditionally coconut meat, cascarilla, and cool water with specific prayers addressed to the practitioner's own Ori. Rogación de Cabeza, the head prayer. Purpose: to cool, clarify, and strengthen the Ori before significant work, after periods of stress or confusion, or as a regular monthly practice. What you need: fresh coconut meat, cascarilla powder, cool water, white candle, white cloth. The process: 1. Sit in a quiet space. Light the white candle. 2. Mix a small amount of coconut meat or cream with a pinch of cascarilla and a few drops of cool water to create a paste. 3. Place the white cloth on your lap. 4. With your right hand, begin to apply the paste to your head, starting at the crown, moving in a gentle circular motion. Apply to your forehead, temples, and the back of your neck. 5. As you apply, speak to your Ori: Ori me, I feed you. I honor the divine nature within me. I ask for clarity of thought, alignment of purpose, and the strength to walk my true path. Cool my head. Open my sight. 6. Sit with the paste on your head for at least 50 minutes while the candle burns. 7. Rinse with cool water. Feel the water clearing and refreshing as you rinse. 8. The Rogación can be performed at the new or full moon as a regular practice. The major Orishas of LUCUMÍL with their saint correspondences. The Orishas of LUCUMÍL are the same beings as the Yoruba Orishas. Elegua is Eshu/Elegba, Yemanjá is Yemanjá, Ochún is Ochún, Shango is Shango, Ogun is Ogun, Obatala is Obatala, Oya is Oya, Orala is Oromala. The Cuban context has given each specific Cuban character dimensions, specific Cuban stories, and specific associations with the Cuban landscape. What follows covers each major Orisha in their LUCUMÍL expression with specific practical guidance. Elegua. Orisha of crossroads, beginnings, and all communication, infant of Atocha/Saint Anthony. Elegua is the first Orisha honored in every LUCUMÍL ceremony and the guardian of all crossroads and thresholds. His image in LUCUMÍL tradition is typically a small concrete head with cowrie shell eyes, placed behind the front door of the practitioner's home, the first to be greeted upon entering and the last to be addressed before leaving. He is simultaneously the most playful and the most serious of the Orishas. Playful because he governs chance and possibility, serious because nothing happens without passing through his domain. Elegua is associated with the colors red and black, the number 3, Mondays, and the crossroads itself. His Oche opens or closes paths, enables or blocks communication, and governs the space between intentions and outcomes. Working with Elegua means attending to beginnings, honoring what stands at the threshold, and maintaining proper relationship with the force that decides which of the crossroads for directions your life travels. Daily Elegua practice: every morning, greet the Elegua figure behind your door. A tap on the figure with 3 knuckles, or simply addressing him: Elegua, I greet you this rise. Clear my path today. Laroi Elegua. On Mondays, leave a small offering, candy, a cigar, or a small amount of rum at his feet. Rotate these offerings regularly, do not let them sit and rot. Shango, Orisha of thunder, lightning, fire, and sacred justice Santa Barbara Shango rules thunder, lightning, fire, and the fierce justice that punishes dishonesty and rewards courage. He was the fourth Olofin of Oyo, a historical figure of extraordinary power who was deified after death. In Lukumi, his royal character is paramount. He dances with his double axe, he throws thunder from the sky, he cannot tolerate injustice or cowardice, and he lavishes extraordinary generosity on those who honor him honestly and completely. The identification of Shango with Santa Barbara is one of the most striking in the tradition. Barbara, who was martyred and from whose tower lightning struck her father as punishment for killing her, the thunderbolt as divine justice. Both figures hold the double axe and both are associated with thunder. Shango's colors are red and white, his number is 6, his day is Friday. His sacred stone is the thunderstone. His foods include omla and ram. Shango justice ritual. When facing a situation of injustice, a legal matter, a situation where you have been wronged and need the truth to come out, light a red and white candle before his symbols. Speak directly and honestly. Shango, King of Justice, I present this situation to you. I ask for the truth to be revealed and justice to be served. Offer omla if you can prepare it. Pour red wine on the earth. His response comes through events in the physical world. Watch for lightning during storms as a sign of his attention. Orola, the witness Ifo in Lukumi. Orola is the Orisha who witnessed every human being's choice of destiny before birth and whose divination system allows human beings to consult that witness about the nature of their specific path. In Lukumi, Orola is both an Orisha and the name for the divination system. His colors are green and yellow, his number is 16, and his sacred relationship to human destiny makes him the most consulted of all the Orishas. The manner that Orola, a yellow and green beaded bracelet received in a specific ceremony, is one of the most widespread Lukumi practices, worn as a protective amulet that declares the wearer is under Orola's protection. The ceremony for receiving Orola's hand is one of the more accessible initiatory steps in the Lukumi path. Iowa Orola, receiving Ifo. Lukumi equivalent of the Yoruba full initiation into the Ifo system is available only to men in the Lukumi tradition. The Babalawo is the master diviner, the keeper of the 256 audio, the person who can consult Orola's complete knowledge on behalf of practitioners. In the Lukumi diaspora in the United States, there are hundreds of practicing Babalawos serving communities from Miami to New York to Los Angeles. The Isle Community and Sacred Infrastructure. The Isle is the sacred community organized around the godparent, the Babalosha or Alosha, who is the head of the Isle and the spiritual parent of all its initiated members. The Isle is simultaneously a family, a church, a school, and a mutual support network, and membership in a good Isle is considered one of the most important protections available to a Lukumi practitioner. The godparent relationship. The godparent relationship in Lukumi is one of the most sacred and most binding in the tradition. The godparent initiates the godchild, performs the ceremonies that make the Orisha in the godchild's head, and is thereafter spiritually responsible for the godchild's development in the tradition. The godchild owes the godparent the same respect and filial devotion they owe to a parent, and the godparent carries the sacred weight of the relationship with their godchild's head Orisha. Initiation Kariocha, making the Orisha. Kariocha is the central initiation of Lukumi, the multi-day ceremony through which the head Orisha is formally seated in the initiate's head. The initiate's previous spiritual condition is ritually dissolved and a new sacred identity is born, and the initiate becomes a member of the Isle with specific sacred obligations and specific sacred protection. The 7-day process. Kariocha, the making of the Orisha. Day of initiation, the primary ceremonial day. The initiate undergoes ritual shaving of the head, specific sacred baths in waters prepared with the herbs of their head Orisha, the application of sacred markings in the collars of their Orisha, the reception of the Orisha's otains, the ceremony of seating the Orisha in the head, and the first manifestation of the Orisha through the new initiate. This is the death and rebirth. The Iwo who emerged from this ceremony is a new person with a new sacred identity. The year of the IYWO. After Kariocha, the new initiate enters a year of specific restrictions. They wear white every day for the year. They do not shake hands, touch is restricted to those within the tradition. They eat at specific times and from specific vessels. They do not look in mirrors for the first 3 months. They do not go out after dark for extended periods. They are, as the Candombo tradition also recognizes, in a period of becoming the spiritual newborn growing into their sacred identity. The ITA, during the ceremony, the head Orisha speaks through Diligon divination to deliver specific instructions, prohibitions, and guidance for the initiate's life the Eater. These instructions are received and recorded and are the initiate's specific sacred roadmap for their life. The warrior's first steps into the tradition. Before Kariocha, and often years before it, a practitioner may receive the warriors, Elegua, Ogun, Okosi, and Osan in a ceremony that is among the most accessible first steps into formal Lukumi practice. The warriors are the protective Orishas, the ones who guard the practitioner from harm, open their paths, and provide the sacred infrastructure of daily life. Elegua at the door guards the threshold. Ogun in his iron cauldron protects with iron force. Okosi's bow and arrow ensures that the practitioner's aim, their intentions, reach their target. Osun, a cup with a rooster on top that stands upright when the practitioner's spiritual condition is good and falls when there's danger, is the warning system. Receiving the warriors. How it works. Receiving the warriors requires working with a qualified Babolosha or Alosha, an initiated Lukumi priest or priestess who performs the ceremony. The ceremony determines, through Diligon divination, which specific warriors the practitioner needs and what specific instructions apply to their care. The warrior objects are prepared specifically for the practitioner and charged with the Orishas ache through specific ceremony. Home care for the warriors. Caring for the warriors at home. Elegu, placed behind the front door, he is the first one greeted when entering and addressed when leaving. Monday offerings, candy, cigars, rum in small amounts. OGN, kept near Elegua or in a separate but related space. Tuesday offerings, palm oil, smoked fish, rum. When working with Ogun for a specific purpose, place an iron nail in his cauldron with your prayer written on paper. Okosi, kept with Ogun. His bow and arrow should point toward the direction of your goals. His offerings include smoked meat and alcohol. Osen, placed high, always above shoulder level. This is critical. Osen must be elevated. He is the spiritual early warning system. If Osen falls, stop what you are doing immediately and consult a godparent. Something requires attention in your spiritual life. General care, refresh the offerings regularly. Never let offerings rot and remain. Clean the figures periodically with specific preparations. Greet them daily. Even a brief acknowledgement maintains the relationship. Divination in Lukumi, Diligon and Ifo. Lukumi has two primary divination systems. The Diligon is used by initiated Oloshas to consult the Orishas on behalf of community members. Ifo is practiced by Babalawas and is the most complete and most sacred divination system in the tradition. Receiving a reading. What to expect. When consulting a Diligon reader or Babalawo, before, avoid alcohol for 24 hours. Wear light, colored clothing if possible. Come with a specific question or a general orientation for guidance. What area of life most needs clarity? During, the reader will cast the shells or Ifo instruments after specific prayers. They will read the pattern that appears, identifying the audio and reciting relevant verses. They will ask about your life situation to connect the audio's general wisdom to your specific context. The EB, the reader will typically prescribe an Igbo to address what the reading has revealed, either to activate a positive audio's potential or to resolve a negative one's challenge. Take the Igbo prescription seriously. It is the practical action that makes the reading's guidance real. After, do not share the specific contents of your reading with others who are not initiated. The reading is between you, the Orisha, and the reader. The prescriptions should be carried out within the time frame specified by the reader. The Tambo drumming ceremony. The Tambo is the primary public ceremony of Lukumi, equivalent to the Zaya in Candombo. It is the gathering of the Ocha community for drumming, sacred songs in Yoruba, and the invocation of the Orishas through the bata drums. The bata drums. The bata drums are sacred instruments. Each drum is initiated, and only initiated drummers who have received Ana can play the sacred bata drums in ceremony. The bata speak the specific rhythmic language of each Orisha, specific patterns for each Orisha, and the properly played talk, combined with the correct songs and the correct ceremonial context, cause the Orisha to descend into their initiated devotees. The Tambo structure. A tambo begins with the paid, the honoring and sending away of Elegua, clearing the ceremonial space for the other Orishas. Then the drummers play the canonical sequence of Orisha songs, starting with Obatala and proceeding through the pantheon. The community sings the responses. As each Orisha sequence reaches its peak, initiated devotees whose head Orisha is being called may receive their Orisha manifesting in the specific character, costume, and movement vocabulary of that Orisha. Igbo offering and sacred reciprocity. Igbo in Lukumi is the primary ritual technology of sacred reciprocity, the material expression of the practitioner's side of the exchange that sustains the relationship with the Orishas. Igbo ranges from simple food offerings to the most elaborate animal sacrifice ceremonies conducted by initiated priests in specific ritual contexts. Ademu, food offerings. Ademu are the most accessible form of Igbo, the simple, regular offerings of specific foods to specific Orishas that any practitioner can make, initiated or not. The Ademu is not merely a symbolic gesture. In Lukumi theology, it is genuine nourishment for the Orisha and genuine maintenance of the sacred relationship. The quality of the food matters. The intention matters. The regularity matters. How to make offerings accessible practices. Making Ademu offerings, step by step. General principles: always wash your hands before touching the offering. Prepare the food fresh, not leftovers. The offering belongs to the Orisha first. Do not taste before offering. Light a candle in the Orisha's color when making the offering. Leave the offering for the prescribed time. Dispose of properly. Okun's offerings to the river, Yemanjás to the sea, Shangos to the base of a palm tree, Eleguas to the crossroads. Ochún honey offering, small bowl of honey, 5 yellow marigolds, yellow. Candle. Address: Oreye o, Ochún, I bring you this sweetness in gratitude and petition. State your specific request regarding love, abundance, or feminine healing. Elegu candy offering, hard candy, small glass of rum, red and black candle. Place at the door figure's feet. Address: Laroy Elegua, open my path today. Yemanjá offering, 7 white roses, small bottle of perfume, blue and white candle, small mirror. Take to the ocean or large body of water. Shango offering, Amla, 6 red apples, red and white candle. Address him directly about the specific situation of justice or power you are working with. Obatala offering, white corn or white rice, shea butter, coconut meat, cool water, white candle. His offering is always the simplest and most pure. The color sacred beads and their meaning. The elik is one of the most visible markers of Lukumi initiation. Each Orisha has a specific color pattern in beads, and wearing the colors of one's Orishas is both a declaration of sacred relationship and a protective practice. The collar is not merely jewelry, it is a consecrated object that carries the Orisha's Oche and that maintains a specific energetic connection between the wearer and the Orisha. Orisha bead collars. Elegu, red and black alternating OGN, black and green alternating, or black and green with a purple accent Obatala, or white, sometimes with crystal accents Yemanjá, blue and white, often in a specific pattern Ochún, gold/yellow and amber, sometimes with green Shango, red and white alternating Oye, 9 colors a pattern containing all colors in sequence Orala, yellow and green alternating the Mano da Orala bracelet note, wearing these bead colors as fashion or spiritual practice without. Receiving the formal elik ceremony is a different matter from wearing the consecrated colors received in ceremony. The unconsecrated beads carry no specific Orisha Oche, they are an expression of affinity or aspiration, not a ritual reception. Lukumi and Palo Mayombe, the Bantu element in Cuban sacred practice. Many Lukumi practitioners in Cuba also have initiation in Palo Mayombe, the Cuban sacred tradition derived from the Bantu-speaking peoples of Central Africa. While distinct from Lukumi in its theology, practice, and sacred objects, Palo works in the same communities and many practitioners navigate both traditions, understanding them as complementary rather than contradictory. Palo's tradition centers on the Nkisi and the Nono. The Palo tradition is more directly engaged with the world of the dead, its cosmology is intensely ancestor-focused and its practices involve direct work with the spirits of the dead in ways that the Lukumi Orisha tradition approaches differently. Lukumi today, Cuba, the diaspora, and the world. Lukumi/La Regla de Ocha is one of the most rapidly growing sacred traditions in the contemporary Western world. From its Cuban base, where it survived the Castro government's initial hostility to religion and has now been grudgingly accepted as part of Cuban cultural heritage, it has spread through the Caribbean diaspora to the United States, particularly Miami, New York, and New Jersey, where large Cuban, Puerto Rican, and Venezuelan communities maintain thriving Lukumi are. The global community. The internet has dramatically changed the Lukumi community. Practitioners from Europe, Latin America, Australia, and Asia connect with established receive readings remotely, and participate in a global conversation about the tradition's development. This globalization has raised important questions. How does the tradition maintain its integrity as it spreads beyond its Caribbean cultural context? What is the role of non-African, non-Latino practitioners in a tradition with such specific cultural roots? How do the established Cuban and Puerto Rican lineages relate to the growing African practitioner communities who are reclaiming the tradition's original form? These are living questions without settled answers, signs of a living tradition actively working out its own future rather than a museum piece preserved in amber. Allegricity convergences. Sacred concealment and the hidden face of the divine. The Lukumi strategy of identifying Orishas with Catholic saints, giving the sacred tradition a protective public face that concealed its African heart, is one of the most consequential acts of sacred ingenuity in the history of religion. For Allegricity, this teaches something important: sacred knowledge does not always announce itself in its full form. Sometimes the tradition wears different clothes in different contexts, the same divine force addressed through different cultural forms. The Holy Greek practitioner who honors both the cultural specificity of each tradition and the divine reality that all the forms point toward is practicing the same discernment that the Lukumi community practiced under slavery. The Rogasian de Cabeza and the Holy Greek head. The Lukumi Rogasian de Cabeza, feeding, cooling, and clarifying the Ori as foundational preparation for all sacred work, is the Cuban Yoruba articulation of what Allegricity holds about the practitioner's inner preparation. Before the practitioner can serve as a genuine vehicle for sacred force, their own head must be in order. The Rogasian is a specific, accessible, unpracticable technology for this preparation, and it maps directly onto the Holy Greek understanding that the feeling dimension must be attended to before the other tetrarchy dimensions can function from their fullest foundation. The warriors and the guardian presences. The Lukumi warriors, Elegua at the door, Ogun in his iron cauldron, Okosi's bow aimed at the target of one's intentions, Osun standing high as warning, are the most complete model in any tradition of the Holy Greek understanding of specific protective presences in the home. Each warrior governs a specific protective function. Together they constitute a complete sacred protection system for the practitioner's home and life. The Holy Greek ancestor altar and the practices of sacred space maintenance in the rituals book are in the same tradition as the warrior-specific sacred presences given specific material homes, maintained through specific regular practices, serving specific protective and guiding functions. The tambour and the sacred drum. The Lukumi tambour, with the initiatory batter drums that speak the specific rhythmic language of each Orisha, the community singing the responses in Yoruba, and the Orishas descending through their horses as the correct talk is played, is the Cuban African conformation of what Allegricity holds about sacred sound. The drums speak directly to the divine. The divine responds to the correct rhythm with presence. Sound is not accompaniment to the sacred, it is the primary vehicle of the sacred's arrival. The Holy Greek use of toning, chanting, and specific sound frequencies is in the same tradition as the Battal's sacred language. Oche and the Holy Greek meal blessing. Oche in Lukumi, Axe in Candombo, Ash in Yoruba and Allegricity, the same word, the same force, the same theological reality. Every time the Holy Greek practitioner speaks Ash in the meal blessing, they are invoking the same divine creative power that the Lukumi community has honored for 300 years in Cuba. The meal blessing is not a borrowing of a pleasant-sounding word from an unfamiliar tradition. It is an invocation of a specific, living, ancient sacred force whose character and whose history the Holy Greek practitioner now knows. Axe. Oche. Ash. The power is the same. Laroi Elegua. Kowo Kobayosar Shango. Ora ye o Ochún. Yumaya Olodo. Lukumi ceremonial salutations to the Orishas. 300 years of slavery and colonial persecution, and the Orishas are still here. They survived because the community that carried them refused, generation after generation, to let them die, hiding them in the faces of Catholic saints, singing their songs in Yoruba to the melody of Catholic hymns, passing the sacred knowledge from godparent to godchild in the darkness of the cabildos. That survival is the most powerful evidence of what the tradition claims: the Orishas are real. Their Oche sustains those who properly honor them. Oche. Grand Rising. Personal Reading Series Allegricity 11.Q Productions May 2026.